Meeting, and we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, may I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie?
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Stinger,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. Motion's approved. We'll move on. High school leadership class will not be joining us this evening. We'll look forward to their report in the near future. And we'll move on to presentations, and we'll begin by welcoming the Plante Moran team. And Donna?
Yes.
With our audit report. So we're looking forward to hearing the good news.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Weedman. And thank you to the Board of Education for having us here join your meeting tonight. We have audited the district's financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and governmental auditing standards. As a result of our audit, we have issued an unmodified opinion on the district's financial statements. This is the highest form of assurance that we can provide as auditors to report that your district's financial statements for the June 30th, 2020 year are fairly stated and can be relied upon. We did not note any internal control deficiencies or non-compliance items with laws and regulations. You know, as we know, this was not a normal year, as of June 30th, 2020, a normal audit year. You know, upon the shutdown back in March, you know, a good portion of the business office operations moved into a remote environment. And as a result of that, we did evaluate the internal controls and processes that were in place prior to the shutdown and post shutdown. And, you know, we did observe that the district was highly proactive to ensure that the controls were still functioning and in place in accordance to the procedures that the district relies upon in their processes and procedures for the business office. I did want to highlight, included in the district's financial statements, we continue to report the significant underfunding liability related to the multi-employer pension plan, the MIPSERS plan, and the allocation of this multi-employer pension plan that is attributable to Lake Orion Community Schools amounted to $167 million liability at June 30th, 2020. And then the retiree healthcare portion of that was approximately $36 million. Now, the total liabilities at that statewide program plan, you know, in total, the pension and the OPEB liability are around $40 billion. And so this 167 million and 36 million is Lake Orion's allocable portion of that total liability. I did want to note as well that, you know, again, you know, beyond the numbers, as auditors, we also evaluate compliance with laws and regulations, compliance with the sinking fund and the bond fund program. We do evaluate, and we did note that the district was in compliance with those rules and regulations. And one other thing I just wanted to mention, you know, we do evaluate compliance with the Michigan Budget Act as well. And the district is in compliance with that as well. It was a bit of a roller coaster of a year for 2020 as it relates to funding. You know, you started the year not knowing what your funding increase was set to be, and then ended the year in June, essentially after the emergency and the state of the, you know, financial struggles at the state level, being communicated that you were looking at a potentially $650 to $700 per pupil funding cuts in June, and not knowing which period that cut was going to hit. Ultimately, that funding cut was $175 per pupil, but you did not know that until August of 2020, and that was impactful to your June 30th year. So that information came out well after the close of your year. So it was a challenging budgeting year, but you stayed in compliance with the Act. Lastly, I just want to mention too a couple things. GASB 84. This is a governmental accounting standard that governs fiduciary activities. And essentially this accounting standard required districts to reevaluate fiduciary activities. This would be like student group activities and clubs. And those have been historically reported as fiduciary, as agency funds. This standard required districts to, the standard actually changed the definition of what a fiduciary activity was. And as a result, the district now has moved those funds to be under the governmental umbrella. And there's a new special revenue fund as a result of the adoption of this new governmental accounting standard. I will mention as well that with the onset of the pandemic, this standard was actually deferred for a year. So districts did not have to comply at June 30th, 2020. But Lake Orion already did all the hard work behind implementing this, and so was well prepared to implement this year. And just finally, just to mention that the district is taking advantage of one of the CARES Act provisions, which allows for the deferral of remittance of FICA. And essentially, this provides a low or a no interest-based cash flowing loan to the district, and repayment of that isn't until December 2021, 50%, and December 2022, 50%. So really the district is taking advantage of this program that was put in place under the CARES Act. On the federal program side, we also have issued an unmodified opinion. We had no audit findings as a result of testing the Child Nutrition Cluster program. The district, it continues to be a low risk auditee. That means you have a historical track record of positive audit results in your single audit realm. I am going to turn it over to Jenny. Jenny Colbo is a manager on the audit. She is going to cover the highlights with respect to the general fund. Jenny?
Yep, and everyone can see the slides, correct? Okay, great. So as Donna mentioned, the next few slides are going to focus on the general fund, since that is the main operating fund of the district. We are historians in nature, so these numbers are as of June 30th, 2020. This first slide here is looking at the general fund revenue by source. So your total revenue in the general fund was approximately $83.3 million. And as you can see here depicted in orange, the largest source of revenue of the general fund is the state revenue, which makes up about 71.9%. As Donna mentioned, the district was slated to receive a $136 per pupil increase, but actually received that $175 per pupil reduction. So it really netted out to be a $39 per pupil less than what was expected. The next largest source of revenue in the general fund is your local revenue at 11.2%, and that is where your property taxes are, followed by other at 7.4%, and then state restricted retirement makes up about 6.3%. So that is the money that is given to the district by the state that the district has no control over, that they have to turn around and pay right back into the retirement system. And then lastly, the last category would be your federal revenue, makes up about 3.2%. This next slide is now looking at the general fund expenditures or by function, and this is how the district is allocating its resources. So total expenditures at June 30th, 2020 were about $84.2 million. And the largest piece here would be the instruction and instructional support, which make up about 76.2% of expenditures in the general fund. So these are actual dollars being spent in your classrooms. They're the cost of teachers, your parapros, and other pupil support. The next largest category would be operations and maintenance at 6.1%, and then school administration at 5.6%. All of your other categories are under 5%. And if you were to compare how things are being allocated this year to prior year, everything remained very consistent. This next slide is taking those same general fund expenditures and now looking at them by the object code, or what the district is using its funds for. So public schools are a service organization, and like most service organization, your largest expenditure is going to be your cost of people. So your benefits and salaries, as depicted here in orange and blue, make up about 80% of the expenditures in the general fund. And then we also want to add in that state restricted retirement, that money that I talked about previously when we were talking about revenue that the district receives and has to pay into the retirement system. And that's about 86% of the general fund expenditures are being spent on salaries and benefits. The next largest category would be your purchase services, make up about 8%, and the remaining categories are under 5%. This next slide is a 10-year history looking at the retirement funding of the district, and it's broken down by the contributions the district pays into the MIPSRS plan. Depicted here in orange would be the state restricted retirement, and then the blue would be the cost that the district has to pay in. Also in here is that gold line is your per pupil foundation allowance. So as you can see, your per pupil foundation has remained relatively flat over the years. And this line here does not depict that $175 reduction that was received this year. So as you can see, the retirement expense continues to grow. And contributions this year approximated 39% of your cover payroll. So what that means is for every dollar you are spending on payroll, 39 cents also has additionally to go fund the MIPSRS plan. The district bared about 27% of this burden, and then the state piece made up about 12%. This is going to continue to increase. It is expected that for the next year, for fiscal year 21, that it's going to go from 39% to 42%. And the district's portion of this is going to continue to grow as well. And it's expected to be anywhere from 27 to 28%. So as you can see here, the trend continues to increase, and the burden that the district bears is also continuing to increase. This next slide is looking at the general fund balance for the past 10 years, and it is broken down into the different categories of unassigned, assigned, and non-spendable. So at the end of the year, the general fund balance was approximately $6.8 million, which was a $919,000 decrease from the prior year. Fund balance as a percentage of expenditures was about 8.1%. And when breaking the fund balance down into the different categories, there was $260,000 of non-spendable, and the remaining piece of fund balance was assigned this year for working capital and cash flow needs, and also your long-term obligations of compensated absences and self-insurance. So there was no unassigned fund balance as of June 30th, 2020. And this next slide is just a snapshot of the change in fund balance in the general fund, starting with the beginning of the year fund balance at $7.7 million. And then once you factor in the revenue and expenditures that we spoke about on the previous slide, the decrease is $919,000 for the fund balance of $6.8 million. And as I mentioned previously, this equates to 8.1% of total expenditures. And to convert that into how many weeks of operations the district could run with the fund balance, that would be about 4.2 weeks of operations. Now Donna's going to go into some concluding slides.
Yeah, so we just wanted to comment a bit on, kind of the state of public education funding currently in these uncertain times we are in. Back in August, there was a special revenue estimating conference performed at the state to gauge, where revenue stood back in August. The previous revenue estimating conference was back in May. And of course, at that time, there were quite dire predictions as to the fiscal stability of the state budget and the school aid fund as well. But in August, the revenues reflected better, not great, but better than originally projected when the communication was coming out that districts were going to have to absorb a $650 to $700 per pupil cut. So, really the message here is, as the pandemic continues on and the longevity of this emergency that we are in, it continues to create a feeling, uncertainty around the funding at the state level, not just with the state budget, but how it translates to the school aid fund as well. As a reminder, as of September 30th, the state's school aid budget was propped up by approximately $500 million of federal stabilization funds, the coronavirus relief funds at that time. Where we stand today, there isn't additional federal resources equivalent to that as of yet. So we continue to project there's going to be continued budget challenges. The next revenue estimating conference is in January. So we're all very anxious to see how the state's economy, how those tax receipts, how that's all playing out. One thing that is a significant change is related to the federal dollars that are flowing through to districts right now. Really not since the Great Recession did we see federal funds flowing to public schools at this level. But it's important to highlight that there is a big difference from 10 years ago when there were stabilization funds compared to today. Back then, you were able to really offset revenue cuts at that time with those dollars. The coronavirus relief funds and the ESSER funds and these grants that are flowing through today have strict strings attached to them. There are very complex compliance rules. The money was essentially deployed to states and then down to districts really before all the regulations were finalized. But these dollars can only be spent on pandemic emergency related expenditures. And so, really the burden is on the district to ensure that they're accounting for and identifying those specific expenditures to be in compliance with these grants. And we do know that working with Mr. Fitzgerald, working with Mrs. Curtis, they are on top of all of the rules and requirements surrounding these new grants. But the funding is complex, and you will, as a result, have a robust federal programs audit next year, because these will be dollars that are accounted for in the 2021 school year. So just to recap, positive audit results. We do want to thank the business office for their time and effort in preparing and being prepared for the audit. And they do a great job. And they were well prepared and attentive to our team throughout the audit process. So thank you, Andrea Curtis in particular, John Fitzgerald, and the entire business office team.
Well, as always, we have a lot of teamwork going on between the audit team and our in-house team, and it always seems to work very well. And again, the outcome was fantastic. I'd like to open it up for any questions for Donna from the board. And I can't see all of you, so just speak up if you have a question.
Jim, it's Mary Jo. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
On slide number 6, Donna, I'm not sure if this should be directed at you or not, but I'm just curious, from a financial perspective, how much of an issue is it when you don't have any unreserved fund balance? I'm guessing you want to have some unreserved if you could. How much of an issue is that?
Yeah, I mean, really the unreserved speaks to, the amount that isn't essentially earmarked for a specific purpose. So as of the end of the year at June 30th, I mean, there were your budget that you adopted for the next year expected those significant cuts. So essentially there were, planned use already of your fund balance as a result of that at June 30th, 2020. If anything, it is a clear reminder of how important having adequate fund balance is, in addition to providing the workflow, working capital the district needs to pay bills, to pay payroll, especially in times when you're not being funded, as well as the fact that a lot of your grants are reimbursement based. You have to pony up the money ahead of time before you can, get reimbursed for those dollars. But I think, it was very clear this year how important when districts were facing these significant cuts in funding. Although it was only $175, luckily, it could have been worse. And had the district not had fund balance to the point that you have, there would be, and there were many districts who found themselves in that position, who were frantically looking at immediate cuts in programs, people, where that fund balance allows you some time to make thoughtful decisions. And so it was very much highlighted this year. So very good question.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Nate.
I have a question, one slide before the retirement funding in thousands. And Jenny and Donna, I'm wondering if you can just help me make understanding out of that. I've always struggled with that one to understand. We see it in a year-over-year annual report, and challenged to think of it as that's a decades long or a generational challenge. And what happens if that yellow line doesn't change? And Jenny, hearing you say that the obligation goes up to, I think you said 40% coming up here, and just trying to make practical understanding of the implication there. I think what I take out of that is that if that yellow line, which is the state funding, doesn't change at a local level, that means it's coming out of the classroom. You don't have a lot of options other than that. Is there a different way of thinking about that, or how you might make practical sense of that chart?
I think you explained it well, because essentially what is happening, and look at since 2010, the amount of your retirement as a percent of your total expenditures has just increased year over year over year, without corresponding increases in your funding. So those dollars are required, that you are told what you have to pay with the MIPSRS plan. And so it does impact your cost structure. So you have to make modifications in your cost structure in other areas in order to continue to contribute an increasing amount year over year. So absent increases in your per pupil funding each year, you are making adjustments elsewhere in order to comply.
That's not good in the long term. Because it's tough to influence, right? We can only do so much at the local level. We got to keep our voices loud at the state level. There's only so much we can do to manage against that.
Correct. And I think one question I often get in this realm is, our contributions continue to increase every year. Why are we not seeing a corresponding decrease in the total plan obligation? So, just the pension plan portion at the state level was about $33 billion underfunded. That's up from, I believe, $29 billion last year. And that simply was due to an actuarial study that was done back in September 2018 that revalues the cost of that plan. Okay. So people live longer, all of those factors are brought in, and it continues to outpace the amount of contributions, even at these high levels, to bring that liability down.
Thank you.
Donna, while you're on that for just one more moment, could you just briefly touch on what we're paying for there, that it's not a direct cost to us for our retirees? Just give a brief explanation on that as well.
Yeah, so the allocation of that, we'll use the $33 billion underfunding. The contributions required are based on what your current contributions to the plan are today. So your, qualified payroll that you have at Lake Orion, you're making a contribution into the plan. Maybe that's 0.5% of all contributions in the plan. So they allocate you 0.5 contribution or 0.5 of the liability in the plan as a result. So Jim, to your point, the retirement or the retirees that you're paying for aren't necessarily Lake Orion retirees. You're paying potentially for other retirees in the state. So if you think about districts that have shrunk in size considerably over the years, such as Detroit Public Schools or Flint Community Schools, they had a lot of employees maybe 10 years ago. Now they have less. Today they're contributing less into the plan, so they're allocated less of the liability. That allocation process is the the accepted method for all plans across the country, and that essentially is how it's required to be allocated.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Birgit, I think you had a question.
I have some questions and some comments, and boy, this MIPSers thing just keeps growing. And I think, Donna, to go on what you just were talking about, it's a lot of districts are dwindling in size, and even if the size in pupils isn't, there's the workforce, more retirees go into it, and it progresses the plan out for districts. And we have this discussion every year, and it seems to only be growing. No one seems to have been able to solve this. I want to go back to what you said about the federal audit, and I believe there's a $750,000 threshold that triggers that, which probably isn't hard for a district to make. But you said we're going to have a robust federal audit next year. I think you guys as auditors are going to have a lot of work, because I think everybody's going to have a robust audit with all the federal funding coming in. But I wanted to also ask you about bonded construction fund audits and when to expect that, since we're in a bond. And one of my questions is, does that come into play with each series that we have going? And can you tell me when we can expect to see that?
Yeah, so when there's, now the sinking fund, that is every year. So that is something that's audited, and your funding comes from, the millage that was approved by the voters. And so that compliance is done each year, and that is reported in your financial statements each year. When there's a series of bonds, we audit each year the expenditures and the bidding and compliance with the ballot language that the voters approved to ensure that it's in compliance with those regulations. And we report in your audit each year your compliance with those rules and regulations. At the end of that series, upon completion, there is a final reporting that is done, and we will report that the bond is complete. It will be in your financial statements, and the district is then required to do a transmittal report summary that goes to Treasury. And so that closes out that bond at that time. Had we found in the audit each year any issues or findings related to that, those would be reported as findings to you each year. Yeah.
But my understanding is that after a substantial portion of construction on, say, our series 1, which we're working through, then you do, I guess it's called, I learned, I'm not an accountant at all on this, the bonded construction fund audit. And that's separate though, or is it not?
No, so we would do the audit of the construction fund when it's greater than 95% complete.
Got it.
That's when
what I was after.
Yes, the final audit is triggered, that has to be done. But again, we don't do it all at once. we do it slowly as those dollars are spent over year.
Great.
Good question.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your time and for being here tonight. I'm sorry we couldn't be in person. This is very different, having it on Zoom, but I appreciate the work you do for our district and with the audit. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Donna?
I would like to thank Donna and Jenny for their work in the program and in terms of the audit practice, and especially thank Andrea and her team, particularly Andrea, for all the hard work. She really carries the load on this whole process, and once again, and things have come out quite well, and particularly under the circumstances, very well.
Great. Well, thanks to all. Thank you, Donna and Jenny, for being here tonight, and to John and Andrea for all your hard work on this. I know it's a year-long endeavor. It's not something you just whip up in a couple of weeks, and to make it work smoothly, you got to do it right all year. So thank you very much, and we will look forward to seeing you next year.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we will move on to our next presentation, our enrollment presentation. And I think, Rick, you're doing that? Or do I have that right?
Do we want to let our guests go first? I think they're actually listed first on the agenda. GMB. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Let's go with GMB. Great.
You're welcome, Tom.
Thank you. I owe you.
All right, good evening. Tonight, Tom and Mitch are here with us from GMB, and they are going to review our work on Stadium Drive as well as Paint Creek. Our design committees have been really busy, and so they're here to give you an update regarding those two projects.
Sure, thanks. I'll give you a little kind of background again, just to remind us where we were and how we got here, and then Mitch will walk you through the images and the drawings, et cetera. We're at another exciting milestone for the district in terms of projects. The drawings are substantially complete for Paint Creek and Stadium Drive, and they're ready to go out to bids real soon here. Basically, if you recall, this phase is primarily secure entries only for these two buildings. And again, we're using the same playbook of the standards we developed with your group earlier for the other projects. And so the same kind of standards are being applied to these projects. They both have two phases to them in terms of design and construction. So Paint Creek, and each have a little bit different reason why they have different phases or two phases, but Paint Creek, relatively easy project to do the secure entry. The office is in the right location. We just had to do some reorganizing to make all those standards we're after for security implemented. It is going to have its second phase of work done, which is the bulk of the work in the building and upgrades, especially as it relates to the cafeteria and some of those things. That actually happens in Series 3. And the main reason was cash flow. We had, the 3 series, cash is only available so much for each one of those series. And we needed to push some projects back. And we did the whole exercise of where things fit. And Paint Creek, being one of the newer elementaries, has some of the lesser needs of them. So it moved back into the 3rd series to fit the cash flow component. That's primarily why that project has its phase later. That phase will include some site work, some upgrades, the cafeteria renovations, et cetera. We did look at all of that and master plan that a bit now so that we didn't undo anything in the future. So the schedule for that, just if you recall, if you look at the schedule, it'll be 2024 that we will be designing that project, the remainder of Paint Creek, for construction in 2025. Then Stadium Drive, a little more complex project, primarily 2 main reasons: to get the security components into it that are the standards we developed for your district. You have a buried office that doesn't have access to meet those standards. It's not unlike what we had at Orion Oaks. We had to move the office up front to get access to it so that it could have control of guests without them entering into the building. The other component that was even more difficult here at Stadium Drive is a 2-story building. It made the solution a little more complex. Not unsolvable, as you'll see, but those two things made this a fairly complex project. The staggering of this project was primarily to get the secure entry done right away so the elementaries could be done with secure entries, but primarily staggered the remainder of its work so that it could be coordinated with the master plan that's going on that site with both the scripts and the CERT campus. And the site work especially all wants to coordinate and be done as one. That's going to start basically in January, and so that we can have that remainder of its project happen next year. So it only has a 1-year lag, where the other building has a 4-year lag. Primarily, again, just to get the whole master plan of that campus figured out in this next year. A little bit lighter design year this year of just these 2 projects. Primarily that was strategically done as well because there's a lot of construction going on right now. Some major projects in terms of Weber and the early childhood centers, a lot going on. So the design end of it's a little bit lighter this year. That kind of overlaps with the heavy construction perspectives going on. Next year's going to ramp up again a little bit. We got a lot of work coming with the Blanche Sims project, starting the process of design, and a lot of furnishings projects coming on board. And then the Scripps Middle School is also slated to start the renovation of that project and part of that design, campus design. So we'll ramp up again next year to quite a bit more work. So that's kind of the background again. Just want to remind you why those projects were 2 phases the way they were, and then Mitch can kind of walk you through them.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yeah, so with that introduction, we'll just dive right into the projects, starting with Paint Creek. So we have a few slides right at the start for reference of the site. Again, not really any work on the site this phase except for a new monument sign, replacing the existing with the new digital board. We're doing at all the elementary schools as we work through each project. But the bulk of the site work will happen in phase 2. Also some overall and enlarged floor plans of the existing building and the existing office layout for reference. So just to help everyone get their bearings a little bit. So right here at the bottom is the main entry, at the office just off to the left. And then this plan over on the right side of the page is an enlarged area of the office, which will help us see the work that's getting done there for the new work. So I am going to zoom us in a little bit here on this office to show the renovation work that we're doing. And I'll start from the outside door and kind of walk us through the plan. So starting here, they'll have the exact same secure entry sequence that we've developed as a standard at all your other elementary schools. So the staff will allow visitors to be buzzed in through this outside door. Visitors will be required to come in through this side door into the office area. These second set of vestibule doors will be locked during the school day, so no one can just walk directly into the building. You'll have to come into the office first, check in, and then if the staff allow visitors to, you can get buzzed back out through this door. At the back of the office, there's another secure door that again needs to have a card reader or a key to get through. So really you're creating that kind of secure perimeter here where visitors are not allowed into the school unless someone in the office lets them in. So you'll have your reception and waiting area right against the exterior windows. And again, that's an important feature of a secure entry. So there's strong visibility of who's approaching the building from your staff. And to reinforce that, we're also replacing the windows along this wall. So the previous windows had a lot of mullions, a lot of vertical and horizontal lines that made it a little bit hard to see out of them. So we're reconfiguring those to make visibility easier for staff. And then also the columns that are out here, they're currently big brick piers, and we are putting in some steel columns to narrow those down, again, with the idea of improving visibility out of the office. Immediately behind the reception and waiting area is the principal's office. You have the secondary office in that space, a work and mail room that will have the mailboxes for staff, and also copier and things for the reception and waiting area. We have a new health room with its own toilet, and then a new conference room as well. One of the more unique aspects of this project is that these resource or classroom spaces here, which actually have an operable wall in between, part of the design process, they really felt a new restroom was needed to support those students. And so we are lowering a section of the existing floor to create that new restroom. If you recall this building, or if you've been in there, you'll know that there's several different levels going on with some stairs down from the main entry. So there's a little bit of floor work going on to make that happen. And then really the back of this office space over here, none of the walls are moving, but we are upgrading and improving finishes in there, so it feels consistent and appropriate with the renovation work that we're doing at the front. Any questions on that layout or how that's configured? And I would say regarding the rest of the building, again, the work is relatively limited. We are touching a lot of doors in the building. So part of the work is providing new secure door hardware for all the classrooms. And then we're also looking to potentially replace some of the exterior doors around the outside of the building as well. So those are part of the project here as well. And then I will briefly take a quick look. This is the exterior elevation, again, showing those new windows that are going in by the office and narrowing up those piers, again, to improve visibility. And I believe, oops, jumping around. And then here's that view again of what that new office will feel like as you walk into it. So this is the new reception desk that will be in the main office. It looks very similar to the desks that we have put in the first year projects, and that's very intentional, creating kind of a branding or a Lake Orion visual, so you know where you're in an elementary office. They all feel very similar. Any questions on Paint Creek before I move on to Stadium Drive? All right.
I have a question.
All right, couple questions. Jake?
Yeah, so when you first walk in, is the cafeteria is now accessible, and that's going to be sealed off as part of the secured entrance? Isn't this that area now you can get to the platform from the lobby?
Yes, that's correct. So this dark wall that you're seeing here is a section of wall we're infilling. There's currently a door right here, and we're infilling that, so there's no longer a connection into the secure vestibule to the cafeteria. We are adding in a new door back here to help with traffic flow for students as requested by the building, to allow kind of an indoor and an outdoor out of that cafeteria once the secure vestibule is in place.
Okay, good. And then the plan, like right now, there's a little seating area in the vestibule. Would we be leaving that seating area in that secured, that pre-security area, call it? Is there any vision for that?
We are planning to leave. I think we are pulling that bench out, I think, in this corner that you're talking about. The intent is not really that there's anyone lingering in there, that you would come into the vestibule and then be moved into the office, or that you're not just waiting in that space for long periods of time.
That makes sense. Thank you.
It could, what can happen if there are people lingering in there is they'll be polite and let people in, and that kind of violates what you're trying to do to keep people from just walking in.
Mm-hmm. Birgit?
Thank you. Hi, Mitch.
Hi.
Can you clarify for me? I think I heard you say that there's going to be new windows up front, and you're modifying the posts for the visual perception from within the building. Is that pretty much all you're doing to the exterior facade then? There's no bigger change it's all interior work for the most part.
Yeah, that's correct. So the way the building was already laid out, we didn't need to do any additions for the office. There is a potential, again, in phase 2 related to the cafeteria, that there could be some additions or rework of the exterior of that portion of the building, but we're kind of intentionally leaving that untouched for now. So we don't end up redoing any work, 4 years, 5 years down the road.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we got it covered.
Great. Then I will move us on to Stadium Drive.
Sounds good.
All right, and as Tom mentioned, a little more complex solution at this building. We did do a new office addition here, again, to pull the office out to the front of the building so it wasn't buried. And so I think it's best to talk about that in a floor plan. So again, some site plans for reference. Not a whole lot changing as far as site layout or flow as part of this phase. Again, that will be happening in phase 2. Really, the change is that the visitor drop-off loop for just this 1 year will be getting a little bit shorter because our new office addition will be built at the end of it. And so that loop shortens up a little for a year until the new site layout will be designed and reconfigured and constructed. So
while you're on this slide, it might be worth everybody just take a quick look. Most of the time, people think Stadium Drive faces straight north. It actually faces northwest. So as you see the entry, you'll understand how it faces open towards the drive when you move on here in the plan.
right. So current main entry is over here, right? And so we're actually shifting and relocating that main entry into a new addition off this portion of the building. And so when I go to the floor plans, you'll see that the floor plans are actually rotated a little bit from this view. So don't let that throw you off when we. So some overall existing floor plans, again, for reference. So back here is the current main entry with the office across the hall. And you can see that buried condition where there's no real way to bring a visitor into that office safely without exposing them to the main corridor that runs right through the building. So we had to bring the office to the front side of that corridor, essentially. All right, there we go. And so what we did, I'll start on this overall plan, is we relocated the office out to this portion, and this area that the office is vacating will become part of the STEM area or something else in phase 2. So we're not just abandoning that space, it will be reconfigured, just not as part of this project. You can see it's a 2-story solution. So we have the main office and entry on the first floor and then some additional space on the second floor. And where the existing staircase is, we're turning that into a hallway and pulling a new staircase out into the addition. So I'll zoom in a little bit on this and explain it all to you here. All right, so back here where it's labeled corridor is the current staircase in the building as it sits today. That's going away. And then this new area in dark walls is the new addition. So you'll walk in through this door over here is the new front door. Again, that same secure entry sequence that we've developed at all the elementary schools where you'll be buzzed in through the outside, be allowed in through this side door, check in with the receptionist, and then be allowed into the building through this other back door here. Reception desk sitting right in this corner. Strong views out to both actually the bus loop and kind of the parent drop-off area. So it still has good views. Immediately behind that, principal's office and secondary office, a workroom tucked in the back. Kind of in this middle portion here, we have the health room with its dedicated toilet, and then a toilet for office staff off the workroom, a conference space here, and then that new staircase sits up in this corner. So these doors into the staircase and the doors into the corridor are fire doors. So those are intended to be open most of the time, and they'll only close in the event of an emergency. So that it will feel connected to the rest of the building. If we take those stairs upstairs to the second floor, you'll see there's 2 small breakout rooms and a staff toilet. And there were no staff toilets on the second floor of that building. So this was a great way to kind of fill that need while we're also doing the secure entry portion. And these 2 breakout spaces are, providing ancillary staff, and they kind of come out of the media center renovation portion of the project coming next year is kind of what those spaces are coming from. So that layout makes sense to everyone? Any questions on how the office is laid out?
Again, questions. If you have a question, please just speak up.
Hey,
I can see everybody here. Nate?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Jim. Mitch and Tom, I didn't think to ask this question in the committee meeting. Had we, or Heidi also, had we considered the cost benefit of the whole thing being 2 stories to match the footprint on the second story with the footprint on the first? I don't know if we would need the space or whether we had just done a rough cost benefit aspect of that.
Yeah, we looked at in the design, there's really no program space that's new. And so had we have built other spaces out here, we would have not had the funding. We would have had to steal funding from somewhere else.
Got it.
Because the things that we have left for this project are renovations of the existing media center, and it's unique. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. It's a unique location in the core of the building, but that the primary renovations are going to go on in that core. And so build things out, we would have they would have had a strange relationship to the classrooms because it would have been off on the, which the entry can do and the office can do, but not some of those student services spaces. And it was just program. We didn't have more program for more addition.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
The capacity of that new stairwell, because the stadium stairs from memory are quite wide, at either opposite end. Is this stairwell create enough student movement? Is there going to be a lot of student movement down coming from the upstairs into this corridor that's right by the office? And is there any concern about that?
It's really about the same size as the existing stair. So it should accommodate the students just fine, and code wise, we're fine as far as how big it needs to be to get students in and out. We are envisioning that it does get used fairly frequently. And again, part of how we're accommodating that is, again, having those doors held open all the time. So it feels more like part of the hallway than a closed off stairway.
There was some discussion with the principal too. He thought potentially when the kids are going to the playground, et cetera, they really could go the other direction and use the other stairwell, which is by the playground. So they might change some of the flow of the building a little bit too, to not necessarily come this direction.
Other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I was on this committee and I just want to point out to everybody how well Mitch and his team put in the amount of doors on that second floor. I don't know if they set a record with square footage of doors in that amount of space, but it was amazing.
I just wanted to ask, as far as the current location of the elevator, that's just going to stay there and stay functioning?
That's correct. Yep.
It is slated to be upgraded in the next phase. Same location, but upgraded cab.
Okay, well, we have Tom and Mitch here. Are there any other questions related to construction that you may have before they go?
I had a question, Jim.
Yes, Mary Jo.
Tom and Mitch, sorry, I didn't think to ask this at the committee meeting. So, and I'm not sure if Heidi or who would answer this, but when the kids get off the bus, would that be the entrance the kids would use coming off the bus as well? Or would there be a different flow of students in another direction?
I'll hop us up to the site plan here. I think that can ultimately be a building decision that they could probably choose a couple different ways to do that. But I believe currently they're envisioning bringing students in through what the old main entrance, or what is currently the main entrance from the bus drop off.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about, but I don't think they've, finalized necessarily everything yet. That's Rob's wheelhouse. How pickup and drop off occur. So
Okay.
they were talking about a few things, but the building hasn't solidified anything at this point yet.
Okay, thank you.
They'll have more options now, which is great.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions? All right, hearing none, everything looks great. You've been up against it with the trades and with everything that we've had to deal with and delays, and still things keep moving right along. It's really a great focus and a great outcome for all the challenges we've had. And so we appreciate that. And we'll look forward to the next report.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
All right.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My apologies for the misdirection there. All right. So now we will move on to enrollment presentation. And Rick?
Thank you. All right. Everyone's seeing the screen? Okay. So this year is going to be a little bit different than the typical enrollment presentation, obviously, because we're dealing with some unprecedented times. In the packet that I sent you, I'm going to jump right to page 3 to kind of set the stage. I think probably the biggest area of interest is what has happened this year.
Rick, I think your presentation minimized.
It did?
Yeah, I just got a blue screen.
I think when I'm
There you go.
back now.
Yep.
All right, so in this dual monitor, I have to look away from the camera. So I'm going to be looking to the right, which is a little unusual, but I think probably the biggest area people really want to know is what's going on with enrollment currently. We typically at this meeting would talk about trends and history and projections and those types of things. I will get into that a little bit tonight, but I think it's more important for us to focus on kind of where we're currently at and answer some questions. So I will take you to the third page if you're going along. The first 2 pages are just a breakdown by grade level by building of our current enrollment. And recall that when we do enrollment projections, it's important to do a snapshot in time that is equivalent to the previous year. So I always take the week of our first count, and which typically was called Fourth Friday in the past, but now it's on a Wednesday. This year, this enrollment projection and enrollment numbers, were actual enrollment on October 19th, which was a Friday, but the count day that that month was 2 days earlier. John's going to help me out here in just a second, but the box on the top left is what we worked on pre-COVID for projected enrollment for this year. So our projected enrollment K-12 was 7313. We have our resident enrollment here. 105 and 105C is our schools of choice, and the code 06 is employee children. So again, projected enrollment for the year was 7013. To the far right was last year's spring count. We do counts twice a year, and we do our projections relative to spring count for budgeting. So you'll see last year, our spring count here, where my mouse is, was 7101. The difference between that spring count and what we anticipated or projected for enrollment was a total of 88, down 88 students, FTEs. So in working with John, that's what we budget for, a reduction of 88. What actually occurred is this section here in blue. And what we currently have, K-12 enrollment, is 6696, which is a reduction of 317. So I want to put that into a little bit of a perspective to help you out. And when we go to budget, and matter of fact, John, why don't you chime in now, because I don't want people to panic over the budget issue.
Okay.
The reduction of 317 truly doesn't hit the budget as it typically would because of what the state has done. So John, go ahead and kind of explain that if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So these numbers, like the upper left box, the 7013 number, when doing the original projecting work last year, looking at this year's budget before the COVID crisis came along, we normally use that number and feed that into the existing state's weighted formula. So just as a reminder, the state takes 2 sets of numbers and weights them and adds them together to determine what's the number of students they're going to pay us on. So last year and prior years to that, it was 90% of the current year's October count and 10% of the prior fiscal year's February count. So as COVID became a very real situation and all of the issues that came with it, they changed for fiscal 21, and it appears to be a one-time change. They changed that weighting so that there's a 75-25 weight, meaning what we're getting paid on is our student count, 75% of last year's total weighted count and 25% of this year's weighted count. So in danger of going too far into the weeds, it's 75% of the 90-10 weight from last year and 25% of the 90-10 weight this year. As it turns out, based on that change in formula, from a total budgeted FTE student FTE funded perspective, we landed just about where we had expected and projected prior to COVID. 2 different routes getting there. And really the change in the weight for this year in particular is what prevented any kind of funding disaster from an FTE count. And at this point, Rick, if you want to pick up and we'll talk more about impacting next year and that as we go.
Yeah, and I'll kind of get to that as we move through some slides, but I want to put into perspective a few things too. The 88 that we projected to be down percentage wise, and these figures are not on here, so if you want to take notes, feel free to do so, was a reduction of 1.2%. The actual that we've seen, this 317, the difference between our enrollment and actual projected and actual enrollment at 317, that represents 4.5%. So we've seen a 4.5% decrease in our overall enrollment. But if you back out what we anticipated being down 88, we have technically reduced by 229 more than we expected, or about 3.2%. So I think that helps put it into perspective a little bit better, that it's not a huge concern, but I think it is definitely something that we want to monitor. I'll bring you to the bottom left and look at our resident change. That's our kind of our main focus, obviously. We have some control over SOC, but resident, there's a lot of factors that come into play. But if you look at the highlighted yellow areas, the vast majority of where we saw a reduction actually occurred in K1-2 or DK1-2. And K1, this DK, we'll call it DK1. So the first 3 numbers here, that actually represents 60% of the reduction that we had in our enrollment. And it's interesting, if you look at our secondary, especially the high school 9-12, those numbers stayed very flat. Very small reduction. We're talking 4 students, 3 students, 2 students, very small. Another area that I found very intriguing and pleased about, if you look at our change in enrollment from projected to actual for schools of choice, we actually increased by 13 students. So our SOC students who have committed to us, even through this pandemic and all that we've gone through with our different learning platforms and so forth, have committed to stick it out with us. And I think that says a lot about who we are as a district. So before I move on and we talk about where we were with projected and so forth, I think it'd be a good time to stop and pause and see if there's any questions related to that. And then I'll get into kind of the future planning and kind of zip through that a little bit more than we typically would because of the uniqueness of this year. But any questions on?
Questions for Rick? Yes.
I just want to clarify that I heard you say correctly from what John's input was, that the budget impact of the number and reduction that we have goes along with the 88 that you were anticipating originally.
Basically,
as far as it impacts the budget.
Basically a wash, right, John?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Because of the change of the model used, the weighting model.
Other questions?
Okay. Moving on.
I guess
okay.
It's hard to see when we're in the.
Oh yeah, Jake.
Sure.
So I wasn't following the math on how we could net that out, because looking at these numbers, it looks like we're down 88 against the projection, which is 1.2%. And then we're down another 317 against the projection. So we're actually down over 400 versus last year. So I wasn't following. Can maybe explain how those would net out? It looks like they would be additive, not anything that would net out against each other.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow the question, but
let me take
I guess the question is,
go ahead, John,
it looks like we're 400 and something down against last year.
The 405, you're talking about the number in the bottom right here, yes.
Yeah, so we're 5.7% down from last year.
Yeah.
And then just the point that Birgit made, we already thought we were going to be almost 100 down. So the fact, the math, I understand how that math works. I was just a little confused when you were saying, oh, well, it's only 3% because.
So Jake, maybe this will help. So we're actually down 405. we anticipated being down 88. Okay. We're truly down 317 though. And we already knew we were going to be down projected to enrollment. The 88 was what we had planned for. So if you want to do the 405 against it, sure, that percentage is, and I could run that real quickly, it'll probably be closer to about 5.5% as opposed to 4.5, but it's not a significant difference. Again, it sounds like it's significant, but when you're talking 8,000, or 7,000, that number is a little bit smaller. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think I mean, I get it. We're down 405 against last year. So if you divide that by 4 in the 75-25 model, we're going to be down 101 students worth of funding. We thought we were going to be down 88 students worth of funding.
So let me stop you there, Jake. The numbers you're seeing before you, the 7013 projected, the spring 2019 count upper right hand box of 7101, those are all head counts. Okay, so that's the spring head count of 2019, then the October head count. The formula, what we get funded on, incorporates those head counts based on a certain weighting model. So when we're saying we're expected to be down 88 head count, that's only being impacted at 88 times 0.9. So the actual FTE impact is less than the 88. So my point is that there's two sets of numbers we're talking about here. We're dealing with the state, so no surprise. One is the FTE weighted number, and then what's here in our actual resident enrollment model forecast uses actual head count numbers. So the head count for the 7101 is fed into the model. And then in the original calculations, the projected of 7013 in the upper left-hand box fed into the model. And that produced a number that, and off the top of my head, I want to say it was in the 70s. So it was a reduction in actual FTEs we expected to get paid on, something less than the 88 because of the weighting. So when you throw in the box titled with the top in the middle with the 6,696 and throw all that in with the new modified weighting and do all those math pieces, when you work through the double sets of weighting, as far as what we budgeted for on a FTE to get paid, we were off, I want to say, less than 4 kids. And then the actual numbers you're looking at here don't account for our share time count and some of the special ed kid counts. So that has a very slight impact, but an impact nonetheless. So I'm sure that confuses the picture even worse, but I guess my point is that keeping in mind there's head count versus the weighted FTE count. So when you try to do a direct reconciliation, what you're doing, I can more than happy walk you through it. If you want to set up a meet, I can show you how they correlate and reconcile.
No, I get where you're going, but the one thing that we as a board will have to talk about, and just as a community in general, is what happens in the future. Because if they take this 6,700 weighting into next year, that how many, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, how many students come back, but right. We're good this year, but if the students don't come back and they don't change and they don't correct the weighting formula again, we would have big problems.
I would agree.
But I think if history tells us anything with enrollment, and I'll go through that a little bit, I'm confident we will recoup a vast majority of those students. And a number of them, especially at the younger levels, and we're not the only district experiencing this. As we talk to our counterparts throughout the county and even across the state, we're seeing a significant reduction in enrollment in kindergarten and first grade in literally every district across the state. Many families have decided, you're not required to enroll a child in public education, in education, not necessarily public education, until age 6. So we have a lot of families that have opted to say, I don't want my kindergartner's first experience to be what we're going through this year. I'm going to wait and enroll my child a year from now. And we have others that are opting for, well, I'm going to just homeschool for this year. I'll bring my kid back. I don't believe, and we're trying to dig out some of the information. I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but I don't believe we've lost a significant number to other districts because they're doing something different than us. I think they're still here within the community, opting for other programs or options. And once we return to normal, knock on wood, we will see the vast majority of those individuals come back.
When we return to normal.
Yes.
Do we get a report that shows where our 105 or 105C students are coming from?
Yes.
And then correspondingly, where ours are
Yes.
going?
Yeah, and I've shared that with the board in the past, our entrance and exits. I've done separate presentations just on schools of choice and kind of showed, you know, where are we getting kids from? Where are we losing kids to? And we are always on the positive end of the plus minus with all of the districts.
I guess I would ask then that when that comes out this year, to compare this year to prior years so we can really get a handle on where our students are, where we're sending them, to make that a priority, that when that data comes out that we get to see it.
Okay.
Yeah, Rick always does a great job with that and compiling that, and that will be good information for us to take a look at. Other questions for Rick?
I'll move on and try to speed up this a
Please.
little bit to some of the next ones. You've seen this very extensive page of tracking what I call migration over the course of the last almost 20 years now that I've gone back and got that data that far. I'll focus on this bottom right here. So this is the 1920 to the 2021. And if you can see where my mouse is here, this is last year's kindergarten class of 461. And now as first graders, there's only 409. So the number in red is we've lost 52 of those kids that were with us a year ago in that grade and have migrated out. Dang it. So the line, the double line, obviously last year's kindergarten, they didn't have a prior grade. So it's the numbers between the two double lines of 259. And that's important because what I've shared with you in the past, if we look back at previous years, we've actually seen increases. And I've talked to you about this before. Last year, we picked up 70 kids who the prior year were between kindergarten and 11th grade with us. Most importantly, if where I'm circling here, you'll see in the prior year, they were kindergarten of 392. First graders last year, that class grew by 23 students. And I've shared with you in the past, we are typically gaining students in that middle elementary grade level, 3, 4, and 5. You'll see from 3 to 4 a year ago, there were 17, from 5 to 6, 11. So we had a plus coming in of 70. And I've shared with you in the past some real estate information. I don't have that available for you this year. But what we are finding and trending and tracking is we tend to get home buyers in our community who are second and third time home buyers who have children that are already school age. And that is what leads to our enrollment increases in those middle level grades. You'll notice the year before where I'm here, it's 81. Up here, it was 35. And I actually have this in a trend over the last several years. So you'll see the previous year enrollment change, which is on the top right. Those are those numbers I was just talking to you about. We're down 259 this year. But the trend for the last 6 or 7 years has been we pick up kids in those grade levels. So this is our 3-year average of down 36, but obviously that 259 had a significant impact on a 3-year average. It also had an impact on the 5-year and the 10-year average, which is here. So as I look at these enrollment trends and projections and so forth, I really have to look at them. I think we all need to look at them with taking this year into account as being a very odd year and an anomaly, and really look at the trends that were existing prior to this year. And I've talked with you about those over the course of time. And I felt like, you know, we are aging out. Our incoming kindergarten classes have been traditionally smaller than our outgoing seniors for the last several years. We'll see a couple more years of that. and that will start to flatten out, and all our class sizes will be about the same. We'll use 500 as a rough number. So I think it's important to keep an eye on it. You know, here's your kindergarten history. We're down 135 from where we were the prior year, but last year we had 71 more kindergartners than the year before. The year before that, we had 20 more. The exiting kindergarten to the entering kindergarten to exiting senior numbers are here. You know, that went up to 213 this year, but our trends were dropping from, 245 to 164, 167. Again, here's your 3-year average. And then if you take the entering kindergarten to exiting seniors, which is this box here and that number, and then back out the additional kids that we pick up in those middle levels, that's what this bottom box shows you. So the impact on enrollment was not actually as big as we anticipated, because of the exiting seniors. We're making up some of that with the incoming grade levels of kindergarten, first, second, third, which I showed you up here. Not so much in the secondary level. A couple of years ago, we picked up 11 coming 8th to 9th, 5 the year after that. So that's our trending data, looking at it longitudinally. The next one here then is how we project our kindergarten. And I think it's important to talk about that and highlight a few things that the what ifs. So what you have on the top row here is the year of the student, the birth rate for that year. So focus on the one that is 2015. Children born in that year would be enrolling in kindergarten this year. There were 13,547 births that year, which was an increase of 0.69% from the prior year before. The percent enrollment, which we call our capture rate, that's how many of those 13,000 kids actually enroll with us. What actually enrolled was 328. And I'll explain that by going back to the previous slide here in just a second, because that looks different than our kindergarten number, and I'll tell you why. So that capture rate actually went down by 1%, minus 1.02%. What you'll see to the right of that is our projections for the next 3 years, using a 3-year average if the capture rate remains the same. But if you go down here, and if the 3-year average this year would have remained the same, the 3-year average would have been 3.05 here where the yellow is, and our enrollment would have been 409. What we projected, again, was 413 for this last year, but we're actually down 85. So I think, again, this is an anomaly, but I want you to make sure that we understand this 328, because if somebody says, well, that 328 doesn't match from way up here, this one, 328 doesn't match the kindergarten enrollment of 455, or projected, I'm sorry, 385 of actual. The 328, and it'll help you to understand a little bit here, these numbers in blue, we have incoming DK of 57. Those kids were not with us this last year. We have incoming kindergarten of 348, but our class size, as I showed you earlier, is actually larger because that class size incorporates the 77 DK kids from a year ago. Those DK kids are now in kindergarten. So down below here, oops, you'll see new K is 271. The previous DK is 77. That gives us the class size of 348. Those are new kids to the district. I'm sorry, not new, but the class size. What's in pink is the new K plus DK. So the new K is 271 plus the 77 or 57 DK. So that's the 328 of our projected. That's where our difference is. Those are actually new students when you back out kindergarten kids that are with us this year who were in DK last year. So when we look at projections of kindergarten size, it's new K plus new DK. And that's the 328. And our projection actually was 409. And that means we were down 85. A couple of things I want to point out as we move forward a little bit. You'll actually see the county birth rates have went down. The 2016 went up by 0.59, but in 2017, in red here, the county birth rate dropped by 3% that year. which will have an impact on our projections for kindergarten 2 years from now. And then it went down 0.25% a year after that. Down here is your 3, 5, 10, and 15-year averages for the birth rate changes in the county and also what our capture rate has been. Again, I think this year throws that off a little bit. I'll slide down to the next stage here for a second. This is enrollment by building. We try to target, okay, when we have a decrease or an increase in enrollment, because we are neighborhood schools now, we have to keep an eye on that and make sure that capacity is being utilized appropriately. Nothing stands out this year. We didn't see a significant number of kids leave us from any particular building. The difference between 28 and 40 might sound large, but in retrospect, I mean, that's not a huge number of 12. We're not talking 100 versus 10. We're talking 28 versus 40. Our middle school is the same thing. We're talking 15, 24, the size of the middle schools. Nothing alarming there that says people are leaving us from one particular building or another. It's pretty standard across the district. This is our cohorts right now, and I think this is important to take a longitudinal look at as well. So this is our senior class up in the left. When they started with us back in 08, 09, there were 574 kids enrolled in kindergarten that year. There are currently 553. So that class over time, as it's stayed with us for its 13 years from kindergarten through 12th grade, has gone down by 21 kids. But you'll look at our juniors, they have gone up by 24. If you take out this year's 3 that we lost, that number was 27 a year ago. You'll see a lot of black. The same thing with our sophomores. But if you were to take out this year, for instance, I'll go to a red. 16 here in our current 6th grade class. It's down 16 from where it started as kindergarten. But 26 of that occurred this year. So that class was actually up 10 a year ago. The same thing here. Our 5th grade, they're down by 5 from where they started as kindergarten, but 30 kids left that grade this year. That class was actually up by 25 over the course of time. So I think it's important to kind of focus on this migration as well. This 1 year, I don't think we can panic too much over it. I think what history shows us is once they start with us as kindergarten, we generally gain enrollment in that cohort or that grade, if you would, that graduating class as they progress through with us. So it's not alarming. Again, we have to keep an eye on what happened this year and figure out why. I don't have a magic ball to tell you how it's going to play out, but I think it's important to look back on the historical data and not hit the panic button at this time. This is our SOC and how it trends with us over time. So we started the SOC program back in 13, 14, where I'm spinning here. This number of 30 would have been that year. They would have been in kindergarten, and now they're in 7th grade. So what you'll see across here is that year we took 30 kindergartners. The next year we took 12 in 1st grade, 18 in 2nd grade, 10. So over the course of time, our 7th grade group right now, we have accepted 93 of those kids. 42 of them are still enrolled with us. So our retention rate for that grade is 45%. So if we come up here, for instance, this is this year's kindergarten. Obviously, this year's kindergarten. Last year, we didn't take any DK. So that whole class is actually 39. We currently are at our 31 that we enrolled. We're currently at 29. We had a couple that were enrolled with us early, didn't make it through count day. So I think it's important to kind of see the percentage so that we can project how long they're going to stay with us. And on average, it's about 50%. So they start with us, we do some backfill, but we keep about 50% of them. These are the 3 graduating classes we've had so far. There were a total of 17 kids accepted in that 2020 grade level at some point. 54% of that 17 graduated. So where we're at as far as a count goes is everything that's in kind of a pink here is our current SOC enrollment. So the 532. Everything in yellow is last year's SOC enrollment, and you'll see the 17 comes from last year's graduating class. So everything in yellow is this year, or last year, excuse me. So last year we had a total of 503. We actually have 532 this year. So we've increased our schools of choice by 29 students. That's down here in blue. Again, it goes back to what I showed you earlier. The schools of choice are staying with us. We're offering a few more, but we're steady now. I think this number will continue to hover in that just above 500 range each and every year.
And just as a side note, Rick, you'll probably planning on mentioning it, but within the schools of the SOC world, lots of those kids that as they migrate through and they fall off this chart are actually moving into the district.
Yes, we have found in the past that many of our students who start with us as SOC do so in the hopes of being able to move into the district, and they eventually do. And also we encourage our employees' children who register under the LOCS code that I showed you earlier. If their employment does cease with us, they're no longer eligible. So we encourage them to apply through schools of choice. They may not get in, depends on if we have to have a lottery that year or not. So we do convert some of those too, the 06s into the 105Cs. So I know it's a little different than you're accustomed to. Again, I can't focus enough on the fact that we've really got to take this year's data with a grain of salt. I'm not sure how we're going to project moving forward, other than I think we have to rely on what history tells us. And history tells us that we can do a pretty good job of estimating our incoming kindergarten class. And once we do, we typically, that class will grow to some level, not significant numbers, but you know, a good 2 to 3 or 5% over the course of time that they stay with us. So we're not losing kids out of the district. Our issue has been for several years now is the aging out. We're just not having as large a classes as we used to. But if you go back to the birth rates, back in 2000 in Oakland County, there were 16,000 births that year. And you look at where we were at in 2015, it was down to 13,000. So that's why our kindergarten classes are smaller. It's not just Lake Orion. That's a county issue because our capture rate has remained pretty steady, right around that 3%. If you look at our 3-year average, 2.93, take out the anomaly of this year of going down to 2.42. Even the 5-year average is impacted by this year a little bit, but our 3% has been pretty consistent since 2000. And with the birth rates going down from 16,000 to 13,000, obviously our class sizes are going to go down across all of Oakland County.
All right, a lot of information, and I know we'll dig into this later in the year as we prepare for the following year. But are there any other questions for Rick before we close this out? Yes, Birgit.
Yeah, Rick, you mentioned that we would be able to see that data, and I forget when we usually see it, if it has been historically when you do the enrollment review and the projections.
Typically we do the SOC when we ask you to approve SOC for the next year.
No, I mean the data about where students, what happened? Were they dispersed? Did they move? Did they pick a different school? Are they private?
Yeah, that's the SOC.
Okay.
That's part of the SOC presentation where we ask you to continue schools of choice. And then we show you the data of how many schools of choice we've accepted. And then we do the comparison to how many have left us. I believe that's January or February. Julie, you recall when we take it to the board for SOC approval for the following year? I think it's January.
Yeah, I think it's late January usually.
Yes.
So Heidi had done this years ago when she created what I'm going to call it an exit interview. I don't know if you use the same terminology at this point with that for the parents who choose to go. And I know they don't have to fill it out or give us the data, but oftentimes they do. And I'm just curious, have they been cooperative? Have we gotten that feedback? I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying, is that a work in progress?
Yeah, I see all of those that are turned in.
And you're getting feedback.
Yes,
Shall I?
we're getting
Okay.
feedback, and for the most part, most of them are satisfied, but they are moving out of the district for one, excuse me, one reason or another.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions for Rick? And just speak up. I can't see all of you.
If
You
I
do have a
stop share,
question.
does that help?
There we go. All right. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to getting behind some of that detail after the first of the year too. Thank you, Rick. All right, we're going to move on to communications update. Mark?
Great. Thanks a lot, Jim. Appreciate it. Through this whole process, what we've been trying to do, working with Mr. Kirby, since he's come on, is trying to message quite a bit to our community. We understand there's a lot of uncertainty and they want to know what's happening in a lot of circumstances. So we've been trying to really make an effort to keep them in the loop. We've been doing these Friday messages every week. I know you all get them and you see the updates that are happening within the district, and we've gotten a lot of good response from a lot of families, that they feel engaged and that they're understanding kind of what the processes are, the things that we're going through. So that's been kind of a focus since Mr. Kirby and Ben has come on here in the beginning. In terms of my specific job, and it's kind of pivoting as we go forward, I guess at the beginning we were trying to deal with the remote circumstances and kind of getting all the information out about how that was going. And I was working with Heidi on the tech distributions and all of those kind of things. And we were dealing with that at the beginning. And then once the students came back in, we had different circumstances there. And then we were trying to get into school. So trying to get some, we trying to play them up like the first days as if they were another first day of school. And we made new signs and we went in and we treated it like it was a first day of school with all the pictures and the videos and everything like that to try to, encourage that. And now obviously we're back to this dynamic of remote, but we're going to try to find different ways to share the things that students are doing, even if it's in a remote setting. There's been a lot of creativity going on with teachers in terms of the STEM coaches. They were in just briefly though in the STEM labs, and we got some of that information and visited them there. And there's some creative stuff going on there, and et cetera. And so, a lot of our staff have been working with me to try to share some of those things. Chris Bell, in terms of athletics, we didn't have a formal signing day, but we're working on a signing day video, things to that effect. In terms of Ben and the things that we've been working on, and Rick, in terms of, we've been trying to communicate the case counts, and Ben will talk more about that obviously, but we created a dashboard as the state has required us to talk about the positive case counts. Ben and Rick and I have worked on the best way to communicate those things. And we launched a new dashboard, if you've seen it, on our website last weekend to try to make it a little easier for families to read and kind of see where we are as a district with those case counts. But remember that's school associated cases, and that's what we're dictated by the state. So that probably won't change too much because it involves personnel who are on site in our buildings. So with the students not in and very few teachers in, we probably won't have too many in the way of case counts moving forward until we're back in person. I think that's the most of what we're doing. Again, if you know people, we're trying to find out, remote option. It's kind of hard once, teachers and students get in the remote setting. I learned this earlier in the year and in the spring that, they just go about their work, but we want to hear about, we're trying to find out and share about we talked to all the administrators this week about all the different fun things and the great lessons that are happening. We know they're happening, so we want to share them. We had some families share us today, the first couple of days of remote learning. We shared some of the pictures of the students at home and they're engaged, and that's really encouraging for us as well.
Good. Thank you, Mark. Yes, questions, Birgit.
No, Mark, and whoever helped you, I just appreciate the visual that you did with the COVID reporting. I think a lot of people had trouble finding it when it was a commentary, written commentary or narrative instead of the visual. And people are generally more visual, and I appreciate the work that you put into that to create that. I think that's very helpful and useful on our website. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mark,
Any others?
Could you share,
yes.
As you say, Mark, could you share the information about the positive use of Facebook with some of our staff and some of the creativity you found?
Yeah. we all know kind of what Facebook can become, and some of the threads people, are very reactive. We understand that, it's their lives and their children, and they're very passionate about it. But there was a great thread actually that was started last night by a parent on the Lake Orion Community Schools Involved Citizens page that really asked, share, just to have people share about teachers and about certain teachers that have impacted them. And even as of this afternoon, there was 250 posts on there. It was just people saying this teacher impacted me, and they tagged some of those teachers, and some of those teachers were really appreciative of it. So it's just a reminder to all of us, that as much as we get caught up in all of the things, all of these other elements that are happening, that the parents are appreciative of what their children are learning and who's giving them the instruction. Heidi and Carrie's staff is really, working, and they've been doing all these creative things to try to work in and out of the classrooms, and to see them appreciated for that was really a nice thing as I'm monitoring social media.
Thank you. Anything else from Mark? All right, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. We'll move on to public participation. And just a reminder, when addressing the board, we ask that you identify yourself by name and address and indicate if you are representing a group in your comments. An individual's time is limited to 5 minutes, but may be modified by the president. Individuals addressing the board should take into consideration the rules of common courtesy. The public participation portion of the meeting cannot be used to make personal attacks against the school board member or school district employee, which are totally unrelated to the manner in which the member or the employee performs his or her duties. If the comments constitute a complaint against an employee, the employee must be notified in advance and has the right to request a closed meeting. The board is not obligated to answer questions or make comments in response to issues raised. In general, such issues will be referred to the superintendent. So that being said, if you are here for public participation, if you would kindly raise your hand, we will acknowledge you and ask you to provide us with your name and address.
Looks like Jeff Faber has raised his
All
hand.
right, yes, Jeff Faber. Jeff.
Hi, can you see me?
We can only hear you, Jeff.
Oh, you
We
can
can
hear
only
me.
hear you.
Oh, okay, all right. Did I hear the time right? It was 15 minutes or no, just kidding. Kidding everybody. Well, good evening. My name is Jeff Faber. I live at 2964 Crestwood Court, Lake Orion, Michigan. I'm a teacher and a parent in this district, and I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Lake Orion Education Association. First off, I want to congratulate Scott and Bergen on being reelected. It is well-deserved. I mean, you've been hard workers and dedicated dragons since day one. So congratulations to you, and also welcome to our new board members, Danielle and Susan. They're taking on a big job at a tough time, so I give them credit to jump on board right now. Finally, I want to thank Nate and Mary Jo for all they've done for this school district, for this community, because it is a thankless job. And I mean, most people don't know you don't get paid. I mean, we don't really publicize that much, but you do it out of love for the schools. So thank you all. This district has a great deal of teamwork within it. And this tone is really set at the board level. And I'm eager to see the torch passed on again to another generation of board members who will represent us proudly. So this year, we have faced some serious curveballs that no one anticipated. The last 8 months have been rough on us all. And I just want to take a few quick moments and recognize a lot of people who've been working hard. I mean, all of us, but just people and some observations about each who've dug so deep to keep the educational community thriving through this. So cabinet, including Mark, we just saw Mark talking about his great communications. I mean, there's more communications than ever, and the need for it is more important than ever. You'll hear people say, I'm getting too many emails, and then they'll say, I don't know what's going on. So it's a funny combination, and he's got to thread that line, and I give him credit for doing it. John, you and your team, you and Andrea and the rest of the group, working miracles with all these crazy money fluctuations. I'm counting on you in 21, 22 to pull it off again. So John, no pressure. Rick, you and your group, these daily once in a lifetime disasters that occur, and you calmly handle them day after day. So I give you credit for that. Like, we never know what's going to break until suddenly you're like an engineer in the engine room, like, oh no, this part broke, and we run over and fix it. And you have amazing patience to stick with it continuously. Heidi, you and Carrie and the rest of the teaching and learning department, always looking to improve and enhance our delivery for the learners, whether it's in person, remote, or virtually. You've had to really teach 3 different schools at once, or prepare for 3 different at once. And that's an incredible workload. And for you to keep going and not just say, let's just settle. You don't do that. You keep striving for better, and that's great leadership. And finally, Ben, I'm hoping year 2 is a little bit quieter than year 1 for you. I don't know if I can handle a second year of this, or any of us could. Your double duty as our educational leader, and hopefully you must have trained in pandemic logistical or logistics. So yeah, it's a lot to handle at the same time. It's 2 big roles at once. So thanks for taking that on. And like I said, please, next year, a little bit quieter. I also want to recognize the principals who continue to hold their buildings together for all the students and staff. There's so many others: secretaries, custodians, parapros, staff associates, bus drivers, childcare, food services, building and grounds. All these people have selflessly given, digging deep to give their all to make this year a success, whatever the format was. To my fellow teachers, we've gotten a crash course in virtual instruction and new educational technologies. There's been building construction going on in the background sometimes while you're teaching class, but you keep on going. You've learned to make adjustments to things you might have been doing for a long time. You've done it on the fly. You've learned about safety protocols for yourself and others. And you've been rocks for your students. You've been delivering materials to homes and comforting families through so much. Lastly, I want to thank the students and their families. I mean, nobody imagined this is how it was going to be for a school year, especially for people who are in a milestone year like kindergarten or senior year. And you may feel this sting. They may feel this sting more than anybody. And we're right alongside with you, and we're going to do everything we can to make this year special for you. To anyone I might not have named or anyone I missed, and to everyone who I did list, I encourage everyone to hang in there. We're all in this together. 2020 hasn't been what many of us had in mind, but better times are ahead. I know it, and we've got a great team to get through this. So thank you. That is all.
Thank you very much, Jeff. We appreciate your comments. Others for public participation, if you would kindly raise your hand, we will acknowledge you.
I don't see any other
All right.
any other hands raised currently.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So we'll close that, and we'll move on to strategic area discussion items in the governance area. We'll start with the superintendent update. Ben.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it. As far as the legislative update, they're officially in lame duck. The legislature met yesterday, and then they're going to be off until December 1st. So we'll see what happens until year's end, but that's their current schedule. There hasn't been a lot of activity. MDHHS, as many know, implemented their order through December 8, 2020. That certainly impacted us as a school district, as they had mandated that we stop sports at the high school level, stop sports altogether, and then the high school in-person instruction was halted as well. So that again goes through December 8th. So that's what I have for a legislative update. I didn't really have anything further with that. Was there any questions in that area?
Ben, have you heard anything more about what has transpired with SB 1108, where they allowed us to meet for any reason as a board in our meeting remotely through the end of the year, which we all anticipate is going to need to go out further. There's not a lot of faith that the legislature is actually going to come together in December. But I just wondered if you'd heard anything about that through your connections that will be addressed.
I have not heard about that. It did come up in our discussion today amongst the superintendents, but it did not, there's no resolution or any promising news for you.
Okay.
All right, can everybody see my screen fine, or excuse me, my PowerPoint with the slides? Everybody see? Okay, all right, good, thank you. All right, just gonna work my way through. Just want to start off by saying, thanks so much to our staff. Mr. Faber, addressed so many of the different things that are occurring right now in order for us to be successful as a school district and continue to move forward. And certainly thanks to the families, the flexibility that's necessary. And 2020 has just been, well beyond any standard that we've had to experience before. And people have been so understanding. And, regardless of the messages that we get, we know that, we get them on all ends. We get the good and we get the difficult, and then we get the confusing. So we're working through all of those things. We'll continue to move forward. Did want to mention, I really appreciate the board with their prior approval of our extended COVID-19 plan, which allowed us to move from the in-person instruction to remote instruction seamlessly with our planning and preparation day in place to help our staff and students get ready for that. But the approval of the plan that we had previously, really allowed us to do that, with very little disruption. So I really appreciate that. I am going to recommend that we continue our format in the plan that we approved previously. I'm going to speak to that just a little bit, and some of the information that we will continue to monitor as we move forward. This is a slide that I've had in each of the presentations, and as I've worked through these slides, I've been color coding things. Red obviously is the danger, yellow is the caution, and green is all things go. You can see things have really changed, and that's why we made the decision that we made to move the district to the remote setting, and we made that decision for the DK through 8, even though it wasn't mandated with DHHS because of all of the things that I'm going to talk about. We did think it was best for the entire district. The phases in Michigan, that's something that, obviously the state of Michigan is, letting us know where we're at. We'll continue to look at that, but right now it doesn't support in-person instruction. The experiences we had some really great in-person experiences. Some of the challenges that we had, I had put it in the communication. When we talked about our transition necessary, the number of staff and students that were in quarantine, and the positive cases that were in the community, and then coming into the school caused us to make those decisions. Looking at what some other districts are doing is a factor. It is not the determining factor by any stretch, but looking at what other districts are doing, and that helps us inform us of our level of success moving forward. The health department, I still have that as a yellow. They support the district's plans that we have, and they're not at a point where they're going to tell us that you can't do or you can do. They're going to talk to us about what the health ramifications are. They give us weekly reports. They give us numbers of the positive cases within our school district boundaries, and that's all the citizens that live within the school district boundaries. And so they share that information with us weekly, as well as they let us know some of the information below, like test result timing. We had a discussion today what they're feeling the test result timing is compared to what we're seeing in the field is different. We talked with them about that. When we made the decisions to move forward with in-person instruction, the test results for COVID testing was coming back within a 48-hour time period or right around that time period. That allowed us to do contact tracing successfully and quarantine individuals so that there wasn't the spread. But now what we're seeing in the field is that it's taking 3 to 5 days for getting those results back, which severely compromises the ability to do the contact tracing. And we've had some families that have been frustrated because it has taken them a couple of days and they had to make appointments in order to get the test. So that too had compromised things. Our number, continues to go up with the positive test in the district boundaries, as reported on the Oakland County Health Division's website. The hospital capacity, we've heard about that over the last week and a half. One of the individuals on my medical advisory committee that I have, they have provided us with information that shows us all the hospital capacities. That's not driving our decisions, but it is kind of talking to us about what our community, what our county is experiencing, and that is in a caution mode. The vaccine, obviously there's hope of a vaccine. We've heard potentially even next month with there being a vaccine available for select individuals. And I even saw that there's going to be some in-home testing available next month for COVID-19. I'm not sure that I want to administer one of those tests, but it does sound like it's going to become a possibility for less than $50. So I guess we got to look forward to that. Certainly the feedback that we get from the students and the staff and the community guidance that help dictate the decisions that we made recently. And lastly, looking at the Harvard Global Health Matrix and the MySafe start data, that was all the information that we used to make our decision to move towards the remote learning. Again, you can see the number of reds and yellows there, significantly different than where we were when I talked to you last month, where the majority of these were green. And just a reminder that remote learning is tied to the in-person learning, for the remainder of the year. So our in-person students, if we can't continue our in-person instruction safely, then we would move to the remote. So just wanted to share all that information so people knew what went into the difficult decision that we had to make, frankly, over the weekend and on Monday. We had a long weekend. I think it's safe to say that. We ended up with some quarantine information, positive tests. We had to close the school. We had a few schools that had 2 classrooms that were quarantined, and it just didn't make sense to move forward. So I'm recommending that we continue forward the way that we have been, and we have the 2 options. The first is the in-person, which is tied to the remote instruction. As you know, we started on the 26th of October, and the middle school started on the 9th, as well as the high school. And then we did transition everybody on the 18th. And the idea is, and I apologize, it says 12/20 on there, but the idea is that that's going through 12/8. That is when we've tied that. We are in hopes of moving to in-person instruction again on December 9th. I understand that that is an optimistic approach, but we are very interested in getting our students back, certainly our special education and our elementary students. But I will talk a little bit at the very end at what we'll be looking at to make that too a difficult decision moving forward. The second option that we'll continue to offer in our extended COVID-19 plan that you have seen is the Dragon Virtual. This is the 2 different modalities, so to speak, that we've been using. We've been using the elementary instruction that's very similar to the remote. And on this screen, you see our Dragon Virtual teacher, Emily Petty, kindergarten teacher, and that's the type of energy and excitement you need when you're teaching virtually to young learners, for sure. And then in the secondary, we've been leaning on the Edgenuity, which many of those courses have been made unique to Lake Orion Community Schools based on the input that our staff has had. While we're going through this time when we're in the remote learning, we're working really hard to try to, when we get back to in-person, to try to really set ourselves up for success. One of the challenges that we really had is, I'm just going to use the word cross-contamination. We had so many staff that were in quarantine situations. Everybody was helping and assisting and, covering. And when you do that, then we're putting individuals that aren't in a cohort typically into a cohort. So now there is a potential, if that one individual who's now helping 5 different cohorts because something came up, that individual could potentially take 4 or 5 classrooms down if they end up with a positive test. So what we're working on is we're working hard to entice additional substitute teachers. You would think that with the number of schools across the county that we're not doing in-person instruction, that there would be just a plethora of substitute teachers, but that is not the case, unfortunately. So we've looked at the pay structure. We put in some incentive dollars to try to really beef up our substitute pool during this time frame while we have the remote learning. So we'll be continuing to work on that. We do have a large number of substitutes that are guest teachers that are trained with our online formats, and we want to add a couple more of them as well, so that they are ready, to support, with the instruction in the formats in which our families are used to. So moving forward, and I really want to look at the date of December 9th for, again, I know that's optimistic, but December 9th, I really would like to hope that we can get our students back to in-person. At a minimum, my major motivation is going to be special education students, our categorical, just like we did before, and our elementary students, at least our earlier elementary students. I just think it's imperative with some of the data that we have and what we know about the learning loss. Mrs. Bucky did a presentation, talked about, the first grade learners and the gaps that they experienced. And I just feel a moral imperative that we get our early learners in as soon as possible, but it's got to be safe. So, that's going to be the caveat to it all. And what safe looks like is not one number. It's a variety of things that come together that help make a decision. And these are the things I'll continue to look at. It'll be the weekly meetings that we have with the Oakland County Health Division, the things we're hearing from them, and obviously any orders that MDHHS provides for us. There's also state level guidance for in-person instruction right now. And this is also county guidance, but it's dictated by the state. But we're at risk level E. I think that when you look at the risk level sheet, you're going to notice that we are significantly past. I think we're in the 400s, and I believe that we went to risk level E when we got to 150. And so one of the discussions that's been going on across our region is that really needs to be recalibrated. That was done at a time quite some time ago when the level of positive test was significantly different, but there has been some discussion about that. So I guess what I am saying is just prepare yourself. It's going to take a while before we get back to D. It's going to take a while before we get back to C, just with how that is currently set up, just so that everybody understands that. It's imperative to me that that the test results get back closer to that 48-hour time period. Without that, we can't do contact tracing and really protect individuals so that we can reduce the spread as much as possible. We are looking at the COVID data, and again, we've seen some increases as you look at these. The increases have continued. And it came out again today, and there was just a small uptick, but there was an uptick. And then the positivity rate, the 7-day average is really important. When you see a 7-day average that is above your 14-day average, that tells you that you have a problem. And I think that's important for people to understand. When we start seeing that go below the 14-day average, then that is, I don't want to say that is the number, because again, it's all these in combination, but that tells us that there is some progress. And when we look at the numbers going up, went really fast. We noticed that in the spring as well. But what we learned is that coming down goes much, much slower. So, people have to remember that as well. The number of quarantines that we have and the positive test, and we still have data from Clear to Go. So we have a good idea on our staff cases and some of our student cases. I shared again in our publication how many quarantines we had. We had over 300 quarantines with students and over 60 quarantines with staff. And we had over 14 classrooms that we had to have switched to remote. So that definitely needs to be something that is more under control in order for us to continue our programs in person. And the transmissions in schools, the health division, and I would contest, still there is a lower rate of transmissions in schools with all the mitigation measures. They no longer really provide a hard and fast number because just so much has been occurring, but it's still comfortable to say that the number of transmissions in schools is much less than some of the outside activities that have been experienced within our community and in the county and state as well. As far as program integrity, we'll be looking at that, and that is really our ability to have our incredible staff in front of our kids, making sure that they're the ones that are there teaching our students. If we have a significant number of substitutes that would be necessary to provide the in-person instruction, and those substitutes aren't, they're not going to be at the same level of our teachers. If we can't have the great teachers in front of our students, then we really have to question whether or not the integrity of our programs in person is worth moving to in person, or if we should stay in a remote format. I continue to meet with other districts and epidemiologists and certainly hear from our staff and get community feedback. All those pieces of data, will be used as we move forward. What I want to share with you is that if there's going to be any change moving forward, like I said, on the 9th is when our goal is to start up our in-person again. If there's any changes to that, I want to commit that we're going to communicate that no later than December 2nd. That gives our families a full week. And I recognize that it would be nice to have, more time in that. But as far as this being as fluid as it is, I feel like that is a time frame that would allow us to at least see where we're at, hear some guidance from the health division and all these other data pieces that I just spoke to make a decision moving forward. Frankly, if we're not ready to start up on the 9th, we're probably looking at a semester by the time we make the switch again. So just with having the holiday seasons and the family gatherings and those types of things, that's likely where we would be heading. That's not a commitment, but I'm just saying that that's probably what we would end up moving towards if that doesn't happen for us on the 9th. So again, you're going to see in the document for the extended COVID-19 plan that we're recommending that we continue to move forward as we have over the last couple months. What questions do you have?
Yes, Mary Jo.
Ben, that last slide that you had up, the guiding data, is there any way we could get a copy of that? Because I get asked questions about that sometime, and I mean, I always know there's a lot of things, and I don't always catch up faces. So it might be a quick thing that if someone asks, I could just bust it out to them.
Yeah, I will actually email that out so that you have that, and I believe Julie has been putting that in with the board meeting information. But yes, I will definitely have that out there, and in fact, we can Mark can get that posted somewhere as well. So that's available.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Birgit.
Thank you. Ben, I want to clarify a few things with you that I'm not sure how well I took it in. Could you review for me the plan you had for special education? Because they're not in the building right now, right? The wraparound services are not occurring right now?
Yes, currently everybody's in the remote format. That is, and they had their contingency learning plans that they created when we initially went to the remote. And I believe that's what they reverted back to. As far as the special education, we do want to get them back in person. We did have, when you look at like the Pine Tree Center, for example, we had 2 classrooms in quarantine out of that building, a number of staff that was in quarantine. That was actually one of our first buildings that we were struggling with as far as continuing the program integrity and the capacity with our adults. So everybody is in the remote format, and they'll continue to follow the contingency learning plans.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that it doesn't work out to go back on the 9th. Would you be able to follow through with plans to bring special ed back into the building in a similar fashion to the way you worked on it in September?
One of the things that I think that's important to understand is that this isn't an all or nothing. So it's not going to necessarily say, again, the MDHHS order was just high school. If we recognize that we have a challenge with just high school, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that we do, because I don't feel that way. But if we had just the high school was an issue, then we would just continue with the high school in the format that they're in, and we would bring in the others. So it isn't an all or nothing. We will, like I said, look at the staff that's quarantined, the number of students, and then take another crack at it. As soon as we can, as soon as it's safe. So, but I do want to get special ed and our elementary kids in. That is something that will drive me moving forward. In December.
I appreciate that and the clarification of that. Thank you very much. May I ask a question about Dragon Virtual while we're talking about students and learning? And may I ask about the frequency of teacher, I don't know, I mean, they're virtual, so it's not contact, right? But the teacher interaction, maybe that's a good word, personal interaction.
So we have Dragon Virtual, but we have 3 different levels: the elementary, and the middle, and the high, and they all look different. So if I
high school level, please.
Okay. So the high school level is, as we had spoke of when parents were making the decision, and we did our informational meetings. That's a more asynchronous. That's an asynchronous delivery method. So with that, the teacher contacts, we have our own, and Heidi, might be able to speak to this as well, but we have our own that are called mentors. And that's just more of a, name that goes along with pupil accounting and whatnot. But those are the teachers that are dedicated to supporting those learners. So I'm not sure on the frequency in which those teachers reach out to those students, but those students have the ability to reach out to those teachers infinitely. So we have staff that are, assigned to those respective classes. We also have the ability to see how long a student is on a course, how much they're working, what their engagement is, what their progress is, and so on. So Heidi, I'm not sure if there's some intricacies that you want to add to that question or not, but.
Yeah, a few things regarding Dragon Virtual at the high school. Teachers have a set time at once a week for office hours, and then anything beyond that whatever the student may need, they can arrange that with the teacher. We also have to remember that these teachers are also teaching a class during the day, so we're using the same staff that is being a mentor for Dragon Virtual as is teaching our students in person or remote.
You're muted, Birgit.
Sorry, I did that because the dog was barking. So for the parents who were concerned about their perception of a lack of interaction for their students at the high school level, there is the impetus for the students to engage that too, not just waiting for a mentor to initiate an interaction. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think the other thing that it just that's really important to understand is we're a week in, and it is new, and it's similar to the experience. I think we all received a number of communications when we started out in remote, some of the challenges and how people felt about it, because it is different and it's a change. there's a lot of, I hate to use the word, but I'm going to, love for the remote learning that has really, improved. It's really made a big difference. And I'm confident that, that things will continue to get better. Asynchronous is not for everybody. And that was what we, really tried to help. And I understand there's people that had to make that type of a decision because of their health, their health reasons and whatnot, whether it's the student or the families. But asynchronous is definitely a different learning method than, in person or remote and having interactions and whatnot. So.
And to be clear, there's a difference between the remote and the Dragon Virtual. And it's not as much the remote I'm hearing parents complain about as it is Dragon Virtual. And Dragon Virtual is now Dragon Virtual. That's, they're continuing. They're not going remote. They are Dragon Virtual. So
two separate programs. And we did hear a lot of complaining about the remote when we went to remote, because again, it was new and working out the intricacies and things like that. But keep in mind, the secondary students have the option, and we haven't given them the window of time yet, but in the second semester, they will have the option to choose the in-person remote combination or Dragon Virtual. Once again, the elementaries made a year-long commitment because of the staff dedicated to them, but the secondaries will have that option at the end of January.
And should there be a parent with just an extraordinary circumstance, that would be weighed completely separate, right? The teacher, the staff, Heidi, you would weigh a student's individual needs should there be a dire circumstance that would occur. Because there's an impression that in the district that says you won't change, you won't specify to a child's specific need.
That's never been the case, and it has no. But we did come out and say that it is a commitment.
Yes.
The amount of staffing and things that are going into the programming, it's just too hard to explain.
I appreciate that. And there are certain people I have been, I won't say yelled at. I've had point blank in the district for people saying, well, we're offering choice, but it's not enough choice. And people should be able to go back and forth, but that's just not realistic in our in the culture of education. It's too complex. And that, I don't even know how to say it better, right? It's difficult to describe the complexities that this scenario we're in play out.
You really can't truly understand it unless you're in it, in the inner workings of the district. We are honestly doing the very best that we can possibly do. There are many families that I have worked with, but again, it has to be, a unique circumstance. We can't just have, this change going back and forth. It's not good for anybody, including the student. So, and I understand that Dragon Virtual at the high school is very different than what than what our students have experienced in the past. We tried to stress that, but again, I also realize that some of these families, they don't have another choice because of the circumstance of the pandemic that we're in.
And if I could add, Heidi's done an amazing job of being a listening ear for those families that have run into trouble, because we recognize that they have been. She has taken, every call. She's listened. She's been empathetic. She's made the decision based on, what's good for everybody with the information that she has. And I think the other thing that's really important to understand is when you look at the programs that we have our teachers tied to the courses. We have our teachers tied to the instruction, K-12. And that's another thing that's unique, is there are other districts that, they might be able to go fluidly. It's because they don't have their own teachers assigned to them. And so I guess what I would really encourage especially at the high school level, is utilize those, what they're calling mentors, so that they can get the support that they, want to feel. There's been some work to try to give them, time to communicate, and that they just kind of got to get used to what it looks like. If I'm uncomfortable, I don't know, I need some help. And again, we're a week into it, and I'm comfortable as things unfold that it will feel different. May not ever be a certain individual's favorite, but it will start to feel differently.
Well, thank you for entertaining my questions tonight. I appreciate the dialogue immensely. I think it was really important for some people to rehear some of this. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Birgit. Any other questions for Ben?
I do have one more item, Jim, if there's no more questions about that.
Please.
I did want to offer, just so that the board was aware, the December 2nd meeting we have historically in this district used that for a lot of curriculum approvals and changes and things like that. Because of some meeting cancellations and timing, there aren't going to be those programmatic changes or proposals. So I just wanted you to recognize that there's not, right now, there's not a real meaty agenda for December 2nd. And then also recognize that there's apparently a conflict, and Birgit, you might want to speak about this a little bit further, but for the December 16th is our second meeting date. MASB has a training for the newly elected board members, and I think other board members can participate in that as well. And I don't know if that's an opportunity for the board to learn together with the the new candidates or not. But I just wanted to throw that out there, whether the board wants to discuss something different for December meetings or not.
It sounds like there's two pieces here. One is the potential for us not to have a meeting on the 2nd, unless there are some new circumstances, situations, reasons for us to meet, because the primary reason was what you explained to us. The second issue is to see if there's any opposition to moving the meeting on the 16th, possibly to the 17th, like we did with this meeting, to accommodate some other things happening that are resources for board members. So I guess I'd put it out there. Would there be any objection to us moving the December 16th meeting to December 17th? I don't know that there's going to be a large agenda that night, but we do need to meet nonetheless and to review our 30-day plan. And if there's no objection to us moving that to the 17th, we'll take that step tonight. Yes, Birgit.
I would just like to clarify a little bit more of what Ben alluded to, and that on the 16th, the OCSBA is holding a new member orientation for all the newly elected trustees in Oakland County, of which all board members are invited to at 6:30 to 8. But from the 7 to 8 point, MASB is doing a presentation, and it's fostering effective school governance, which would be outstanding for all of us. I just think it'd be a great opportunity for all of us that are going into the new year and as board members, obviously not everyone is, and to learn alongside Danielle and Susan. And maybe that would be helpful for us moving forward as a board as we work through some of the other things that Ben has had us working through. I just couldn't resist that opportunity and bring that up and make sure that we were all aware of that opportunity.
So it's a good suggestion. So, Steve?
I concur with that. I think that's a great idea. Thank you for vocalizing it. Thank you.
Okay, so for our meeting, yes, Mary Jo.
I apologize, but I cannot do the 17th. I
Okay,
could do earlier in the week, but I can't do that night.
let me ask about the 15th.
I could do that. I don't, sorry. to put
Tuesday,
that-
the 15th. How is that for everybody?
Can't do it. It's my kid's
I can do
birthday.
it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, Scott can't do it. All right, well, let's do this. Let's see if Julie can put together some dates that will still work for purposes of covering our agenda and the necessary things that we need to cover. And we'll put out some dates in a poll. We'll see what we can come up with and we'll go from there. Does that work for everybody?
Hey, Jim, I
Yes.
guess my main question would be, we've never, ever moved a meeting because of something that was MASB. And just my thought is the people that would be going to that meeting aren't even going to be at our meeting yet, right? Because they're not going to be sworn in.
Right.
I understand the collaboration and things, but I mean, since
Well,
this is kind of set in stone this whole year.
I think there's a combination of things going. It is a training opportunity and a refresher for board members who are going to be continuing, but at the same time, I believe that those board members would like to be in attendance in one form or another live at our meeting, and that would preclude our new board members from seeing our board process live. I'm just putting it out there as an opportunity. If there's strenuous objection to it, we won't move it.
Yeah, maintaining that, what I would ask is that we maintain that week, the week of the 16th, just for the curriculum
Correct.
proposals and the timing and everything. I don't want to get into another week.
If we choose not to follow through with that, then I would ask that we move the time of the board meeting later so that I could attend part of it with the new board members as an OCSBA member, board of director member. Like move the start time not to 6 for our meeting, but to 7.
Is there any objection to that? Okay, so we'll keep it on the 16th and we'll move the start time to 7. And as far as the meeting on the 2nd, we will plan on not having that meeting unless something develops that prompts us to have a need to have that meeting in the interim. Everybody good? All right, hearing no objections, we'll move along here. Ben, is that all you had?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to policy committee. I don't believe the policy committee met. Is that right? Okay, so no report tonight. Move on to student achievement and Heidi, please.
Okay, since we just left off with the curriculum, yes, on the 16th, I will be bringing to you at this point, I think, hopefully 2 new course proposals for the high school. As Ben had alluded to, with the change this week and going back to remote, there were some meetings that need to be rearranged. So therefore, it's coming later in December than I would typically plan or like, but tis the year of being flexible. So on the 16th, I hope to bring you both of those proposals. So in regards to, speaking to, we obviously went back to remote this week. I do want to point out and thank all of our teachers and our families. I know that this is not an easy thing to, make these changes back and forth, but obviously it is necessary for everyone's safety. So again, I do appreciate everybody's patience and working together through this year. In addition, I will also be bringing to you on the 16th as well. Many of you know we have a partnership with the Orion Township Library. I happen to meet with them again this week, and we will be bringing some of the things that we will be working on this year to you on the 16th. It is going to look slightly different than it has been in the past, just because of the circumstances that we are dealing with and the restrictions, obviously, that we have both at the library and within the district. However, I do still want you to know that that partnership is very strong. We are continuing to work together, and we have some things that have already been happening and will continue to happen throughout the year with the Orion Township Library. In regards to the bond, you heard from Mitch and Tom this evening, and I would like to also point out that our elementary furniture pilot has been going on for a year. And so we're closing in on making some decisions regarding the elementary furniture. So hopefully soon, within the next couple months, we will be bringing those packages to you. But I wanted you to know that this week. In fact, we did meet with the teachers again, continue to gather the feedback. Thank goodness we had a little bit of time in person, because we do have the second pilot that they are testing. So we have been able to get some feedback from our students. Even though it's been a short period of time, we have received feedback from students. So that process will soon be concluding for the elementary. And then we're getting ready to start the process for the secondary. So secondary, middle school and high school, we do have a group of pilot teachers. We've been working with the designer. She is putting together 2 pilot packages for each of the core areas. And so that furniture we are expected to receive during the December break, and then they will pilot for a year 2 sets of classroom furniture, and it will follow the exact same timeline as the elementary. But we are still pressing forward with our furniture pilots at both levels. In addition, Orion Oaks did get to move into their office this week, and so that has been very exciting for them. And now we are just really to the punch list items for Orion Oaks, Weber, and Carpenter. So you'll still obviously continue to see some work going on at Weber on the outside, but the work that has been done on the inside, we're down to those punch list items. So that is very exciting for those 3 projects. Mark continues to update the website. We continue to have bond meetings every week. So you'll find those updates on the website, as well as, every few weeks, me bringing updates to the board meeting. So I think that's it for Bond World. Any questions for anything?
Questions for Heidi? All right. Thank you, Heidi. Curriculum committee report. I don't believe there's a report this evening. Is that right? Or is there?
We have no report tonight, and we were going to meet tomorrow morning, but that's been moved into December. So that's when our next meeting is, I think, December 11th.
Okay, thank you. Lampa Learning Committee. I don't believe there's a report on that either tonight. Okay. So move on to Human Resources and Rick.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to put before you tonight 4 new hires. As usual, we'll give you a kind of a brief history of who we've got here. Danielle Boneman comes to us as previously serving in the district as one of our interventionists. She will be teaching Dragon Virtual. We have 2 science hires at the high school. Marie Kettlehut. Marie comes to us after spending some time teaching out in the Denver area. She is relocated to this area with her husband, who happens to be from Lake Orion originally. So we welcome him back home and her to Lake Orion. We have Chad Ludwig. Chad has several years of experience north of us in a district called Hemlock. And finally, we have Albina Sayamoni, who will be a middle school German teacher. And yes, that is a very difficult position to fill, middle school German. And you'll notice on her resume, she has a vast array of experiences all over the world. Germany, Rome, Austria, Albania. Most recently, she finished up her master's degree at Wayne State. And we welcome her and all of her experiences, and looking forward to having all 4 of those new hires on board.
Great. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Danielle, Maria, Chad, and Albina. And we're happy you're part of our team. Is that it, Rick? Thank you.
That is it, yes.
All right, so we'll move along. Superintendent Evaluation Committee report. We did meet, and in December, at our December meeting, Ben will be bringing forward his goals and his plan, and we'll review it at that time, and we'll do a more in-depth review of the superintendent evaluation process after the first of the year to help our new board members get up to speed with how the process goes and how we conduct it. And we'll touch on some high points when Ben shares his plan with us in December. Any questions on that? All right, thank you. So we'll move on to business and finance, and John.
In your board packet tonight is the October financial report. Just a couple of highlight points on that. Revenue that we recognized to the end of October date is $19,373,198. That's about 24.4% of the budgeted revenues. Our expenditures that we've recognized to date is $17,205,019, and that's just a little under 22%. Again, we're still in that mode where revenues are actually running a little ahead of expenditures, which is not normal for the public school funding, but we'll take it. From a cash position, we are 13.2 million in the bank as of the end of October. And then we're still on track to end in the neighborhood of 7.8 million in cash balance. And again, the level of cash at this point is a result of the different maneuvering the district has done in early July and August in terms of requesting and receiving pre-funding of P18 money, and then also including some of the Corona money, things like that. So that is not normally that high at this point in the year, but again, under our circumstances, we'll take it. Any questions on that report?
That should put us in a position not to borrow this year,
Absolutely.
correct?
Absolutely. And now,
Great.
Which is good.
Yep, it's great.
Also on the agenda is and it comes up every time, every year at this time, it's the annual summer tax resolution renewal. The underlying purpose of it is to approve the 100% summer levy that the district participates in. The board's required to re-update, so to speak, their resolution and authorization on an annual basis. And to read specifically, the board pursuant to Public Act 451 in 1976 as amended, hereby invokes for 2021, and that's on a calendar year basis relative to when taxes are levied. So that's why it reads 2021. Its previously adopted ongoing resolution imposing a summer tax levy of all school property taxes, including operating millage, building site millage, and the debt service millage upon property located within the district, and request each city and or township in which the district is located to collect those summer taxes. Again, that's an annual event that the board does to operate on a levy basis. And one thing I do want to point out too, that in terms of communicating to the community while we're at the board meeting approach, is that the district food distribution program, while we're in the pause here, has shifted from the high school to Walden and to Cirque. So for the foreseeable future, relative to the current pause, which right now defines December 9th, we'll be distributing food from Walden and from Cirque. Any questions?
Mary Jo.
Just a comment on the annual summer tax resolution, just the paragraph that says a regular meeting of the Board of Education of the district was held in the administration building. Obviously, we're not meeting in the administration building, so that would need a verbiage change.
Okay, we'll make an edit on the process before it's signed off on by I believe it's secretary that signs that one.
Correct.
Julie out there? I'll give
Yes,
her
I have it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, other questions for John? All right, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Finance Committee, I know there's no report tonight. Last time we met, we discussed the audit. Facilities Liaison Report, Scott?
No report.
Okay, no report this evening. So we'll move on to action items. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the following consent agenda items. Approve payment of the October bills in the amount of $10,697,251.56. Approve minutes from the October 28th regular, the October 23rd Curriculum Committee, and the November 2nd, 2020 Superintendent Evaluation Committee meetings. Also approving the Head Start Coordinator's report.
Thank you. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie, please.
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. The consent agenda is approved. May I have a motion to approve the extended COVID-19 learning plan update?
I move that we approve the Lake Orion Community Schools Extended COVID-19 Learning Plan Update in compliance with Public Act 149, Section 98A, as presented.
Is there support?
I support that.
Thank you. Julie, please.
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. Extended COVID-19 learning plan update is approved. May I have a motion to approve certified new hires?
I move that we approve the certified new hires as presented.
Is there support?
I support that.
Thank you. Julie, please.
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. Certified new hires are approved and welcome. We're glad you're here. May I have a motion to adopt the summer tax resolution?
I move that we adopt the annual summer tax resolution as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie?
Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. The summer tax resolution is approved. May I have a motion for acceptance of the 2019-2020 audited financial statement?
I move that we accept the 2019-2020 audited financial statements as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie?
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. The acceptance of the 2019-2020 audited financial statement is approved. All right, so we'll move on to recap and final steps. Ben?
All right, thank you. So some data regarding the school of choice drops and ads will be coming, sounds like January, February. That's typically in the, going to be on a board agenda. So we will make sure to have that. Also important to note, and we didn't really add it to the discussion, but there'll be a concerted effort in the spring recognizing, the reasons that people left, and that is to, how we can try to get those students back and serve them in the great capacity in which we're capable of. So just wanted to share that as well. And then my presentation, Julie's always on top of everything, but she's already emailed that to everybody. So you do have that already, but I did want to recognize that. And then we'll work to potentially cancel the 12/2/20 meeting unless, something comes up that is timely. And we'll look to adjust the December 16th meeting to 7 o'clock start.
Great, thank you. And closing comments, Rick?
Thank you. I think Jeff, in his Oscar acceptance speech, did miss out some key people, and that is his leadership team. It's known as CMC. There are representatives, his vice president, and a handful of others. So they have been very helpful as we have worked through all of this as well. So Jeff, thank you and your team as well.
Thanks, Rick. Jen?
Just a welcome to the new Dragons, our new employee Dragons.
Thank you. Heidi?
Welcome to our new employees as well as our new board members. Danielle and Susan. We welcome them, and thank you, Nate and Mary Jo, for your service. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, I wanted to take the opportunity to say thanks to all the administrators, teachers, support staff, students and parents, and all the flexibility that is necessary as we make all these transitions and these decisions, and really appreciate everybody's understanding. Special thanks this month to the business office, Andrea and John and their teams. Obviously, they put together an amazing school year, and it was reflected in the audit. Heidi and her team for the bond work, thank you. And then Rick, certainly the enrollment data is extremely impressive. Thank you for doing that for the district. And I just got to say, Mark just does an amazing job with the amount of energy that he puts into the work to stay in front of all these COVID communications that we're putting out. You see a lot of the public communications, but all those letters that are going out to all the families and all of that was his work and templates and making life easy for the administrators and the rest of us. So thank you. Congratulations to Scott and Birgit, Danielle and Susan on your elections. I look forward to working closely with you and help maintain the great status that Lake Orion Community Schools has and getting it even better. And lastly, thanks to the parents for, again, all the feedback and the flexibility and understanding as we continue to plan for continuous education. Thanks, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thank you, Ben. Steve.
Thanks, Jim. Congratulations to our newly re-elected board members and to the new people, Danielle and Suzanne, and to everybody that ran. It shows a commitment to our district, to our community. And that's it. Thank you, and have a blessed and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Steve. Jake?
Yeah, I want to welcome the new employees, and I want to thank everybody involved in the district right now that, from all of our employees, our staff, our parents, the students, the difficult times. And we got a ton of feedback on the restart and how happy everybody was to be there. And to let everybody know that safety and priority is our focus, and getting kids back in school is our goal. And we're sad that we couldn't continue going in person, but as Ben explained it in detail, that's our push. We want to get kids back in school, but everybody know that we'll only do it when it's safe. And I hope you can appreciate that we had to go back to being remote because, safety was, we were going to err on the side of safety. So I thank everybody for all the work they put into it, and for the community for your understanding.
Thank you, Jake. Scott?
Well said, Jake. Welcome to the new employees. It's always awesome to build the Dragon family. I appreciate being reelected, and I look forward to 4 more years of fun.
Thank you, Scott. Birgit?
Thank you. I also welcome our new Dragon employees. It's an impressive group, and I look forward to hearing more about you. I congratulate our newly elected board members, and I'm sad that we can't be with you tonight. I know you're watching, and I welcome you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And yes, you too, Scott, and on your reelection. I want to thank all our presenters tonight that took the time to be part of this meeting, for Donna and Jenny from Plante Moran, and for GMB and all the work they're doing with Heidi and the bond teams and on the work in our buildings. And John, I just want to congratulate you and your office. Always impressed with the work that you and Andrea do on behalf of our district, and the complexities that never cease to amaze me that are associated with your office and the work that you do. So thank you for the stellar work that you do. I hope that you would let the board know if there are other ways that we could support you in your adventures in finances. I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and I can't do so without thinking of being grateful. And I am grateful for our staff and for all the work that you're doing in these unprecedented times. there aren't enough words to say how amazing you all are, from Ben on down and all around. Everyone is doing an amazing job in an area that it has never been done before. And so everyone is doing the best they can, and I appreciate it. And I know truly our community appreciates it as well. So thank you and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Birgit. Nate?
Welcome to the new hires. Congrats to all 4 recently elected board members. John, high five to you, Andrea, and the team. Thank you to the teachers, staff, students, and parents for your resilience and agility. It is amazingly impressive. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Nate. Mary Jo?
Thanks, Jim. Welcome to the new staff. Congrats to Scott, Danielle, Susan, and Birgit for your election. And I also, while Jeff was talking, was thinking Jeff thanked everybody, and except for himself. I know that I can't even imagine how much fun it's been trying to work through the back and forth and all the logistics of setting up everything for remote versus face-to-face versus virtual. So thanks to him and his CMC team. And staff, we appreciate you. We know how hard it is. We just want you to know we appreciate you very much. And happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Thank you, Mary Jo. And I'd just like to say that change is hard, and we've had more opportunity to experience change than in many of our lifetimes. And in this time of Thanksgiving, I just want to extend my thanks to all of those people who not only take on change, but embrace it for the betterment of the children and the students and the families in this district. And so I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll carry on. This meeting's adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Jim.